Do you really need an employee handbook if you're a doctor with just a very small medical practice and just a few employees? Yes, yes, yes. Did I mention yes? If you want to hear why I think every doctor needs an employee handbook and the benefits of having one and what can happen if you don't have one, keep watching. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Rupa Wong. I'm an ophthalmologist, managing partner for my practice for the past 12 years. And over that time, I have learned a lot and I'm trying to dispense that wisdom to you guys. So I've been getting a lot of questions about employee handbooks. And some doctors might think you don't really need them because maybe you just have 2 or 3 employees. It doesn't seem like it's really worth putting all that effort into creating a 25-page handbook like I did right here. Well, if you think that, you would be wrong, and I'm about to break it down for you. The purpose of an employee handbook is to set forth the policies and rules of your company so that there is no misunderstanding with your staff and with yourself. It really comes down to protecting yourself. Now, an employee handbook is not legally mandated anywhere in the US, but it is one of those things that's considered best practices, and here's why. If you have a handbook that details everything, your attendance policy, all of the different things that go into working at your clinic, then if an employee needs to be disciplined, if they need to be let go, you are protected because it is in black and white and it shows that you are not discriminating against anyone. Now, I never take shortcuts when it comes to legal things. I just never do. And of course, I'm not an attorney, I am a physician. So please always check with your state guidelines regarding your state laws as to what you need to be offering your employees. That has to go without saying. But I don't like to mess around with legal things. I like to protect myself and I want to make sure I'm doing everything properly and by the book. So number one reason is just to have a written set of guidelines. Let's start with the most important, I think, are things like your PTO, your vacation policy, and your attendance policy. Attendance policy, especially in medical practices, can be very problematic when someone doesn't show up. You guys know, if a nurse or your medical assistant doesn't come to work, patients still have to be seen that day. It's a big issue, especially if you have someone that's chronically late or just calling out. So having very set guidelines in writing that say, if you no call, no show for work for 3 days, that's automatic resignation on your part. Having those guidelines, whatever you want them to be, is important because it sets the tone for the office and makes sure everyone is participating equally. And nothing gets an office down like having a lot of call outs and a lot of people that show up late. So you want it to be really clear in your employee handbook. What is the grace period? What happens if they're late 1 time, if they're late 2 times? Have a very strict protocol. Is it verbal warning first, then written warning, then a discipline documentation form? These are all things you want to create to be standardized so you can never be accused of discriminating against someone else. The policies are set. There is no misunderstanding by your employees. They can't say, oh, well, Dr. So-and-so told me to come 20 minutes late. It was fine. I just texted them. No. Clear guidelines as to the protocols of how people are supposed to call out, how they're supposed to request for paid time off. All of that is super, super important. And I think just even more so in a medical practice where our work is really, really, really hinges on the presence of our medical assistants and our receptionists and our nurses, and for me, my opticians and all of that. All right, so that's number 1. Number 2, you want to have a clear rules of conduct policy. That is so important in a very professional environment like a doctor's office. You might think it's common knowledge that people should understand they can't be dropping curse words left, right, and center. They can't be getting into verbal arguments with other staff. That has happened in my practice. Very important to just have it all spelled out, the rules of conduct, how people are supposed to dress professionally, how they're supposed to act with one another, how they speak to patients. All of that has to be spelled out. And I think it's a really important thing. I spoke with our HR attorney. She said not having clear rules of conduct is one of the biggest problems she sees with medical practices because it seems so second nature to us as professionals. What's professional conduct? but you've got to spell it out for everyone so that there is no cause for confusion or misunderstanding. Have a clear HIPAA policy in your employee handbook. So you want to make sure anytime that someone violates the HIPAA policy, that's probably just going to be grounds for termination as opposed to discipline documentation. That's serious stuff. You want to protect your patient's confidential information, and that just goes without being said. Make sure it's in the employee handbook so that they can't say they were not aware that this was an issue. The bottom line with employee handbooks is you want to print them, disseminate them, have them available online, at least have them sign a signature page. That indicates that the employee has accepted responsibility for reading and for understanding the information in your handbook so that there's no he said, she said. It's there, it's written in the policy. They need to respect that and adhere to the guidelines. I also have a social media policy. You guys know I'm all over social media. I embrace it. Not a lot of doctors do, but I think it's a really, really crucial way to get the word out, to deepen my connections with my existing patients and also bring new patients to my door. That being said, if you have an employee that is disgruntled and is talking about what a terrible boss you are on social media, it's obviously going to do the opposite. So you want to have a clear social media policy where you detail what are the consequences and repercussions of negatively talking about you or your clinic or even other staff. Of course, they can talk about being a part of your practice, but you need to make sure that there's nothing defamatory, defamation. What's the word? Again, I told you, I'm not a lawyer. You know what I mean? Bad. You don't want them talking bad stuff about you and putting it out into the world. Yes, I joined a lot of hospitals where I threw that manual in the trash as soon as I got it. It was too long. I skimmed it. But you will have the occasional employees that want to read it. They want to understand what their benefits are, their paid time off. They want to know the expectations for them. So it's really important to put a lot of time and thought. All right, I'm going to tell you a little story as something that happened to me, and I'm not proud to admit this. When we started our practice, or we took over the practice about 12 years ago, 2008, there was no employee manual for Honolulu Eye Clinic. So I was creating one. I took bits and pieces from different manuals that we were using in Boston, and it was long and I was tired and I kind of did not remember exactly what I was putting in the manual. I knew that there were all these parts that I needed to do, detailing their vacation policy or their benefits or the flex spending or the, disability and all of that. But certain things I put in and then I kind of forgot about it. You really should know your employee manual backwards and forwards. And then 4 years later, one of my staff came to me with it printed and highlighted saying, oh, here, it says that I'm supposed to have X, Y, and Z. I couldn't even remember that I had written that. Obviously, if it's in the manual, you got to give it to them. But I made sure to stay up to date and make sure that every single thing that's in the employee manual is something that you're going to stand behind. So learn from my mistake. Know what's in your manual. Do not copy and paste from other people's and not review it. Tailor it for yourself. Now, there are a lot of legal mandates that are federal and state guidelines, things that you have to abide by as an employer, and that varies from state to state. So you probably want to go ahead and put those in the employee handbook just to make sure that you are covering your bases and you are staying compliant with things like the Family Medical Leave Act or COBRA or the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. These are all really important things. You don't want to mess them up. You want to make sure you're abiding by the laws and that you are granting your staff and your employees the necessary benefits. Now, I go above and beyond. In Hawaii, I pay for all of my staff's insurances, health insurance, their benefits. They have no deductible. That's something that we just do in Hawaii. And I've detailed it accordingly in my employee handbook so they know what to expect. All right, so I've told you why you want to have an employee manual to protect yourself and protect your employees so they know what to expect of the job and that the guidelines are set forth. It's just going to make the workplace better. So even if you only have 2 or 3 employees, I still highly recommend putting the time in to develop an employee handbook. Second, how do you write an employee handbook? I didn't learn that in medical school or in residency. So first thing, you want to create an outline of the topics that you know are really important to address. And if you don't know what those are, I'm going to give you my little cheat sheet. It's in the description below. You can just click on it and sign up to get my cheat sheet of just the outline of what an employee manual needs to have. And again, make sure you're abiding by your state laws because they're very different across the country, as is everything. You want to create a summarized version of each policy and just expand on that in your outline. You want to make sure also that your employees have access to it, whether it is online or there's a printed out version available in your clinic at all times. You want to make sure that they also are signing it. Like I mentioned, they have an acknowledgement form, which they sign to indicate that they have read it and they're clearly abiding by the rules and policies set forth in the manual. I would personally have legal counsel review it, or your HR company, if you have one, make sure that it's all up to snuff and that you're not missing any parts. You're not saying something that's incorrect. You don't want to get into hot water with contract law and labor attorney stuff. I mean, you don't want to mess with that. Like, you guys want to be doctors, and we want to do a good job. And I want to share with you the knowledge of how to be a good administrator and how to run your practice. But you want to make sure your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, so you're doing everything properly. And then last, revise it. Don't forget to revise it. And here's another thing. So right now we're going through a lot with COVID and, people that need to be furloughed and so quarantining at home. These are not things that I would traditionally recommend putting into your employee manual, because you want your employee manual to be relatively stable. You don't want to have to be updating it like every 3 months. So what you can do is do a separate section that you have your employees sign with your policy regarding COVID-19 positivity if they test positive, regarding wearing masks in the office, those kind of things that are going to come up, but might not be something permanently embedded in your handbook. You can just keep them as separate and have your employees and staff sign off on them as they arise, because the rules are changing so much right now regarding who needs to quarantine and for how long and what's considered a high risk contact. So you want to be nimble. And if you had to reprint out 30 pages every single time, it would kind of be a nightmare. So I would recommend keeping those aspects separate and just having your employees sign. So there you have it. Yes, you need an employee manual, no matter how small your practice is. Make sure that you spend time reviewing it, adding to it, have someone else that's a lawyer check it out and make sure it's compliant with your federal and state guidelines, and just protect yourself. And it sets the groundwork for really proper communication and expectations between you and your staff. I mean, it works both ways. The employee handbook is not just you telling them, it is you telling them what to do, but it helps them also. It helps them know what their expectations are. What the sick leave policy is. Oh, I'm supposed to call my department manager and provide a doctor's note within 24 hours. That way, when someone doesn't do it, you are not trying to chase them down. You want to just make things easier for yourself. And if you can get it all written down in the beginning, it's going to do that. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I appreciate it. If you want that little cheat sheet of the outline to create your own employee manual, check it out in the video details section below. I've got a landing page there, and click on that. You'll be taken to it. If you have other questions about running a private practice, staff management, HR, malpractice insurance, I don't know, whatever. If you have questions, drop them in the comments below. I am happy to produce content that will benefit you guys. So until next time, mahalo for watching. I'm Dr. Rupa. Please like this video, comment, subscribe, do everything so that I can keep creating these videos for you guys. I appreciate it.